Hello and welcome back to Father Time. This is season 4. It is hard to believe that we're already on season 4 of the Father Time podcast. I'm your host, Chase Green, and with me we have my co host, Matt McBrayer. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Like I was saying, it's very hard to believe that we're already 4 seasons in, or starting our fourth season anyway. It seems like just yesterday, you and I and Scott were starting this podcast, but the journey continues, and I hope that our listeners are enjoying the efforts and the different things that we've talked about in previous seasons. Speaking of things to talk about, our theme this season is talking points, or maybe discussion points. I don't know, which of those do you prefer, Matt?
I don't know. I like talking points myself. I think it sounds nice.
Sounds good to me. So we'll
Yeah.
go with that. We'll go with talking points. I hope that all of our listeners are enjoying this podcast. Again, if you're new to the podcast, it comes out on the first of each month, except for June and July. We want to talk about 5 different topics that I want to make sure that my children are experts in before they leave the home. Matt, you have any thoughts on that initially before we get into this?
Yeah. When I first saw this, I was looking at this and thinking, there are a lot of things that I want my kids to be experts in. I know we'll deal with some of these things, but I think of the ones that I really think about outside of some of the ones that we've discussed for this podcast would be just having a good understanding of how the Bible works and being able to tell others about it. Just having that firm foundation. I know we're going to be talking about some temptations that our children are going to have to deal with because we all deal with them, and like this episode, that's what we'll be doing. But there's just a myriad of topics, that you want your kids to just know front, ways, and back before they go out. I mean, do you want your child to go off to a secular school without knowing how the world came about according to the scriptures? Surely not. Do you want your children to go off and just marry just anybody? Well, let's see what happened with Solomon when he did that. So there are lots of different ways that we could go about this. I'm interested to see how the season develops with these topics, but there's a lot. I know that we're not going to get to all of the ones that we possibly could get to. This is certainly not an exhaustive list, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to make it clear that these 5 topics that we're going to talk about this season are not the only 5 topics that I want to make sure and cover with my kids before they leave the house. But these are definitely 5 that are very important. And we've got some others that we probably could include as well. And maybe we can revisit this at some point in subsequent seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I've selected 5 good ones for us to think about this season. The first one that we're going to talk about is dealing with peer pressure. Matt, would you mind giving us kind of just a working definition, your own definition even, of the idea of peer pressure?
Yeah, it's really the social influence that someone has on somebody else or on you, by other people. So it just the idea of having a particular action and being influenced in that particular action, of course, I think is kind of funny listening to a comedian, and he said, what we were told, is just to say no to drugs, and we were told that we're going to be offered drugs, and that was going to be something that was going to go along with peer pressure, and he jokingly said, I thought I'd been offered drugs more than I have in my lifetime based on that.
Right.
But that is peer pressure. And I think that there are other things that when you think about peer pressure, just that social influence, think about being in school and you've got the uncool kid, and then if you want to be accepted, well, then you poke fun at the uncool kid, or you dress a certain way, they don't dress well, so you dress better or whatever, and you're cool. If you're cool, you have, I mean, even when I was in middle school, I remember there was a certain type of backpack that was deemed cool, and you had that type of backpack, and there were a lot of people with that backpack.
Was that
And
was that the Rolly backpacks that you would, or was that?
no, that was, there was I can't even remember what it was called. Oh man, it was a giant backpack is what it
Okay,
was, and you
I got
put your initials on it. And yeah, I don't even remember what it was. Personally, I was just a regular Jan Sport kind of a guy, but my
you.
parents
Right.
did buy me the cool backpack, and I had that for a while. So,
Yeah.
but that was it. That was a thing. But it gets worse as you get older, really, because the stakes for peer pressure go up.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah. One definition I saw was the pressure to conform to what
Mm.
others are doing. That, of course, reminds me of Romans 12:1 and 2. We're not to be conformed to this world, right? So, as Christians, we should kind of, at the default level, we should be training ourselves to, and especially, training our children to not conform to the ways
Mhm.
of the world. So, we'll talk about that some more as we go on. But so we've defined kind of the concept of peer pressure. I want to discuss some places where our children are going to run into peer pressure, and I think some of these might surprise our listeners. Matt, you got any? And I'll try to fill in some of the gaps too with some places I think of where you might run into peer pressure.
Yeah, you'll be. Of course, we mentioned some already. Of course, in the school systems, your children are definitely going to run into peer pressure there. But you'll run into peer pressure even in church settings, as to what is acceptable and what is not. And of course, when you're teaching your children, you're trying to teach them to be leaders, not followers, anyway. Um, but yeah, you can even find some of that in the church. And, you can make that a positive thing. I'm sure, peer pressure can be positive. Usually we don't talk about it in that light. We talk about it in a negative light. And, when you have, for instance, peer pressure might be to just, kind of stay to your own little group instead of inviting the visitor in. Something as simple as that. But yeah, I think most of the time when I think of peer pressure, though, and I think about kids, I think about the fact that most people I know send their kids to some kind of a school where we homeschool. I know you homeschool, but a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people send their kids off to school, and they're going to be around children that are reared by parents who are not Christians, who in some cases have very detestable moral values. And a lot of those kids are even the ones that are the more accepted for whatever reason. And because of that, there's going to be this pressure to try to fit in with those kids. Well, fitting in with those kids means that you're going to be doing stuff that's wrong. And, we don't want that. It can be as simple as, the way that we dress, our attitudes towards certain types of people. You can have peer pressure to act a certain way towards a certain ethnic group. You can have peer pressure to exhibit a type of behavior. This, I think, is very common because think about this. What is the thought process when it comes to teenagers? Teenagers are rude. Teenagers are rebellious. And how often do you see that plays out in a lot of teenagers' lives?
Well, it's almost like they want to fit that stereotype.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I mean, that's peer pressure. I mean,
Right.
to do that. Is it easier to fit in or to stand against the crowd? It is quite difficult standing against the crowd. Yeah. So what do you have on that?
Well, one thing that I thought of was in school and church is definitely on my list, but also a sports team.
Yeah, I didn't think about that,
Um,
but yeah, absolutely.
yeah, so Andrew plays baseball, and I've had to kind of gently guide him back the right direction a few times because he's got some friends on the team sometimes that aren't really the best influence, and so have to. Thankfully, I'm the coach, so I can kind of keep an eye on things. But yeah, that's one thing I thought of. And then, what about even grandma's house, or something like that, a family member's
Yeah.
house,
Hmm.
where let's say maybe cousins are present that are not being raised the same way,
Hmm. Yeah.
etc. So those are just a few examples. I'm sure we could think of a lot more. We could talk about online, I guess, social media, peer pressure there too. But uh, really, I guess the focus we want to think about mainly here is in what areas of morality might our children be pressured by their peers. So we've talked about, the where. Now let's talk about the what. What areas of morality might our children be subject to peer pressure?
Um, yeah, I think a lot of times that the first realm is in the realm of attitude, as we've discussed. They're going to be pressured to have a certain attitude towards different things, um, and having a rebellious attitude, as we've discussed already, is not good for the Christian because that rebellious attitude should never be directed at the Lord ever, but that's oftentimes what we see. If you have this attitude of, just whatever, then, you're going to feel whatever for the church. Um, think about, I think the pressure as you get older to be promiscuous is very prevalent when you get into high school. That's a hard one to deal with. For a lot of people. Um, another area of morality might be to take part in things that everybody else is watching. The media. What kind of things are they watching or playing? And to be, to give a real life version of this. And some people might think that this is a little thing, but I remember growing up, we weren't allowed to watch The Simpsons. And, everybody else is watching The Simpsons. I mean, everybody. Did you see The Simpsons last night? No, I didn't. And I don't know. I think they're still airing new episodes of that, or maybe they were up until a few years ago. But it's a long running show. And so all of my growing up life, I heard people talking about it. I never watched an episode. So I didn't know anything about it. And there was a little bit of pressure to try to fit in and to try to make reference to the show when, I never once participated in it. But yeah, those kind of things. I think in particular, though, um, when you're looking at this, I mean, there's no bounds to this, but I think some of the pressure that was probably the most difficult is what we already said in the um, promiscuity area when you're in high school. I mean, that one, I don't know if that was like that for everybody else, but it seemed like in high school that was the hardest thing to deal with. Everybody talking about what they had done or what they wanted to do and trying to separate yourself from that.
Yeah, yeah, those are all great points. Yeah, I was public schooled from kindergarten to sixth grade, and then my parents pulled me out of the system, which I was actually very thankful for. But uh, that's a side point. But I can remember, especially in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade, a lot of the sexual stuff was really becoming prevalent, and it was just shocking. Most of us at that age were not even, in puberty yet, and yet they were making graphic sexual comments, and hand gestures and different things that were just totally inappropriate. And you wonder, where is this coming from? And nowadays, I'm told by multiple people that it's not fourth, fifth, and sixth grade; it's kindergarten, first grade. That kids are participating in these sorts of things in various ways and to various degrees. So yeah, it's getting bad, and kids are definitely going to be exposed to a lot of things that they don't need to be exposed to. We could talk about the silly stuff, like you mentioned earlier with the backpack or whatnot. I can
Yeah.
remember several things like that. For us, the backpacks, like a rolling piece of luggage that you would take to the airport or whatnot. Well, I don't know if you remember this, but they came out with backpacks like that. And if you didn't have the rolling backpack, man, you were just, you're just a total nerd to use the term.
Yeah.
Um,
Now you still carry your backpack,
right, right.
That's
And then
hilarious.
you had the Heelys or whatnot.
Oh
The
yeah,
shoes that you could basically roller skate in. And,
I am really
like,
glad I was not a part of that.
yeah. Well, they're
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
They're actually back now.
yeah.
They took a 20-year hiatus and now they're back. But Doc Martens, you remember Doc Martens?
Yes, yes. Uh huh.
Had to have
Yep,
those.
yep.
Yeah, and you could list, a million examples of that.
Oh yeah.
The latest toys that were the biggest fad. So we could talk about silly stuff like clothing and
Oh,
things like
LL
that.
Bean. That was it.
Yeah,
It was the LL Bean backpack. I think that was
right.
it.
There you go.
Yeah, that
That
was
makes
what
sense.
we did. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But
I can remember when the Gap was cool.
mm-hmm.
Everybody makes fun of Gap now, but when I was a kid, man, you
Yeah.
just had to have the Gap shirts.
Or Old Navy. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
there was a time when that was like, oh, you don't
You
buy your
gotta have it.
khakis from Old Navy. What
Right.
kind of a loser are you? Or
Right.
Abercrombie and Fitch, and I
Yeah.
never did that, but
Yeah, I wasn't
they
allowed
had
to go in their store because of
yeah,
the
yeah,
marketing was so provocative.
yeah, it was. Yeah, we didn't.
Just
I didn't do that either. And then
nudity.
there was what was that? There was something else that was akin to that, but did not go to that extent with the marketing.
Hollister?
No, something else. American Eagle. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
they were in that same group, but not
Not
lewd.
nearly as right. Yep.
Yeah.
And then I even think of like the slang terms. Don't even get me
Mm-hmm.
started. Some of these words that these kids are coming up with now, I don't know how much
Yeah.
you paid attention to it,
Yeah.
but I have made it my biggest effort to try to say some of these terms in such of a dumb way
Yeah.
that the kids stop saying them. They're like, "Please stop," And some of them, it's working, and the other ones are like, "Oh, you're so cool." I'm just like, "Oh,
No cap, bro.
I'm taking W's over here." I'm just like, guys, can we just speak properly?
Oh man,
Please.
yeah,
Some of the slang is just getting out of hand. But yeah, I actually texted my brother, who's 15 years younger than me. I texted him some of the words that these kids are saying. He's like, "Please don't say those words."
yeah,
Kids.
yeah. That's
I'm just
great.
like, but anyways, my job is to make it uncool.
Yeah,
So hopefully they'll catch on. So that's the little silly stuff. But then you get to the peer pressure of the biggest hot button issues right now. I think has to be these sexual agendas that we're talking about,
oh yeah.
and
Well,
not just promiscuity, but
mhm.
you can also take it to the the homosexuality and transgenderism and all that stuff.
Yeah, I saw this video a while back, and I'm trying to remember where I saw it. But there was an interviewer going around, and it was like, I think it had to be on Instagram, but they were going around and asking people about what they thought about the LGBT alphabet soup stuff. Anyway, they were saying what do you think about this? And they're like, yeah, I don't think it's right. And they started going off and talking about how they didn't think it was right, and their friend was right there trying to get them to stop talking, to stop standing up for what was right. They're saying, don't say that. You can't say that. And the whole thought process was, and you could tell that their friend was trying to save them from being canceled. That's pretty much what was going on. Like,
Yep.
everybody's going to hate you for this. So the peer pressure was to not say the right thing. And this girl was saying the right thing, and a friend was trying to stop her.
Yeah. That's a great point. Not just the sexual stuff. We'll come back to that in just a moment. But I also think of, you kind of alluded to this with back in the 90s. Do you remember the DARE program?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, for those who are not familiar with that, I think schools have kind of gotten away from it. But the DARE program, I don't even remember what it stood for, but basically it was trying to get you to just say no to the drugs and the alcohol. I remember going to the DARE program and thinking that it wasn't really needed, uh, at least to me, because in my mind, why in the world would anybody want to ever say yes to drugs and alcohol? But I was definitely the exception because my parents had taught me, you know, there's no fun in that whatsoever. But
Right.
obviously, a lot of kids they're not taught that, and no telling how many of my friends from school ended up struggling with that very thing later in
Hmm.
life. And so, here I was, uh, the kid that didn't really get in trouble a whole lot, and I was thinking, well, of course, just say no. That's easy,
Hmm.
but that's not easy, because there are a lot of people who do find themselves very much not only saying yes to drugs and alcohol, but then even becoming addicted to it, and it's all downhill from there, so to speak.
Yeah. 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 I remember all that too. And I remember even with like the drugs and alcohol stuff, when I was getting my permit to drive, I think it's still the same way. I can almost guarantee you, at least in the state of Georgia, it is, because it's where I got my license. But um, on the driver's ed book, I skipped all the alcohol stuff because, like, you are like, I don't need this stuff. I'm not ever going to do this. Who cares? Well, the state of Georgia cares, and you will not pass your test if you do not understand those questions. I know this for a fact. I
Right.
nailed everything else, and then like half the test was made up of all these alcohol questions that I had no idea what the answer to them was.
Right.
And so I remember answering one. It's as funny as it sounds, but I had heard people talk about, well, when you have a hangover, you need to drink coffee, and so it's like, what is the fastest way to not be drunk? Like what does it take? And it was like the answers were like, um, more water, coffee, or more time. Like time was the essence there.
Right.
I answered coffee. I didn't know. I'm like, I don't know this stuff. And
Right.
yeah, so everybody's probably laughing at me right now. Well, I'm just this kid who doesn't know anything about drinking, but
Right.
that was the major thing, and it is a major thing for people. I mean, there's a kid that was in school with me that he succumbed to peer pressure, and he got drunk and he wrecked his car and died. So it is a thing.
Yep.
But yeah, there's all kinds of things like that where you could just talk about this all day long, really.
Oh yeah. Back to the sexual thing for just a moment.
Hmm.
Pornography.
Oh yeah,
Your
yeah,
your kids, if you're not extremely careful, will be exposed to it. Maybe not on their phone because maybe you don't allow them to have a phone, but their friends' phones. And I think we
yeah.
cannot warn enough about this. Look, you got to worry not only about your own kids and whether or not they have a phone or tablet or whatever, but their kids, their friends' phones and tablets as well. I've got a story. Won't say where this happened, but my brothers and a sister, my dad took them to a youth rally one time, and I kid you not, they were sitting kind of toward the back, and there were kids at this youth rally, supposedly from Christian families, who were watching pornography while the preacher was preaching at this youth
Mm.
rally, and they were just laughing and thinking it was hilarious. And
Wow.
here my siblings are going to this youth rally, and they're kind of keeping their eyes open for, if there's a potential spouse somewhere, that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
they're like, we're not going to find one here. It was bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Not them, at least. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
That's rough.
Isn't
Yeah.
that awful?
It
But
is awful.
I mean,
Yeah.
church. If we think that our kids are not being influenced by peer pressure, we've got another thing coming, because we have to do our due diligence to make sure that our kids uh, are not being exposed to this stuff. And I'm telling you, even in the church, if that example doesn't awaken us, I don't know what will.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you really just don't know. There's actually um, somebody I knew that they were heavily influenced the most in the area of sexuality by the kids in the youth group.
Yep.
Um, you know, you leave young people unattended for a long time, without supervision,
Hmm.
and you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's,
Lock-ins, camp,
uh-huh.
you name it.
Yep. Yep. You can't be everywhere at the same time. And so, that, you gotta be careful about stuff like that. And you gotta teach your kids to stay out of situations, and I think especially our young men, we need to teach this too, because of the added trouble of legally being ruined because of a young woman.
Yeah.
Um, I think we got to be careful about that. And, a girl could say anything about a guy, and it probably be taken as 100% truth. And, he may not have ever done a single thing wrong. And then, it's terrible, but it happens. And
Or
so, yeah,
he could be tempted to do something wrong and then does,
right.
and
Absolutely.
gets, scarred for life. We need to teach our young men and ladies to be like Joseph
Hmm.
and run, flee from sexual sin, as the Bible
Hmm.
tells us. So, yeah, it's a rough world that our kids are growing up in. It was bad enough when we were growing up, and when our predecessors were growing up. It is far worse now, and if nothing else, because of the access to things, because of technology.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And
You
and
know,
and please, 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 parents, if you're listening to this, if you don't remember anything else I say today, get your kids off of TikTok.
yeah.
Get your kids off of TikTok. I'm teaching a Bible class right now to our teenagers called the theology of TikTok. And basically the whole premise of this class is your kids are being taught the theology of this world, if you will, the theology of the devil, if you will, on TikTok. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of very, I'm not saying everything on TikTok's bad, but there's a lot of really bad stuff on places like that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and going back to the whole idea of like pornography, I think I don't know, I won't speak for everybody. I'll just speak for myself. That to me is a very uncomfortable subject. And I would assume that it is for a lot of other people. It's an uncomfortable subject, for a lot of different reasons, and the temptation is to leave that alone. But
Just
we
ignore it.
really, yeah, we need to figure out how to teach our young men about this stuff, and try to keep them in the right relationship with God. Yeah, this is going to be an issue. Probably an issue I really need to study up a little bit more and prepare myself more, as I've got three sons now, and I may need to make sure that they're as pure as they can be.
Yeah, yeah, protect them from that great evil for sure. Um, well, let's wrap this episode up if we can. I want to talk about some Bible verses that we need to have our children think about, memorize, hopefully, when it comes to peer pressure. I'll let you give some as they come to your mind. I want to start, though, with Exodus 23, verse 2. Exodus 23, verse 2 says, "You shall not follow a crowd." Some versions say a multitude to do evil. I mean, that sums it up right there.
Mm-hmm. No, oh yeah, absolutely. Um, I was thinking about throughout this whole thing of peer pressure. I thought about Rehoboam from 1 Kings 12, verse 8,
Yep.
that he forsook the counsel of the old men which they had given him, and took counsel with the young men that were grown up with him that stood before him. And so he went with his friends and not with the older, wiser men. I think in like manner, well, I guess one more passage about him. Second Chronicles 13, verse 7 says, "And there were gathered unto him worthless men, base fellows, that strengthened themselves against Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, when Rehoboam was young and tenderhearted and could not withstand them."
If our viewers or our listeners are not familiar with Rehoboam, can you remind us who he was?
Yeah. So, he is a son of Solomon, but he, instead of when being entreated by the people and saying, please make things easier on us, he is pretty famous for saying, you know what, I'm going to throw down the gauntlet.
Right.
He says, you know what, you thought my father was bad. Well, his belt couldn't even fit around my pinky.
Right.
He's, I'm going to be a much harder judge on this. So he was rough. I think though, in like manner with some of this, the idea of making a lot of friends goes into this, like Proverbs 18 and verse 24. He that maketh many friends doeth it to his own destruction. But there's a friend that sticketh closer than a brother.
Yep.
So if you want to please the crowd, you are certainly going to do that to your own destruction. So, and of course, you referenced Romans 12 and verse 2, being not compassionate according to this world, but being transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Right.
Yeah. Yep. So that was another thing. That was you. You brought that up. So.
Yeah, another one I think of is Proverb 27, verses 6 through 9. It says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend. The kisses of an enemy are deceitful." We need to teach our kids how to choose their friends wisely, because a good friend is going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
It's going to be there to iron sharpens iron, make you stronger as a Christian rather than weaker. It says, "A satisfied soul loathes the honeycomb, but to a hungry soul every bitter thing is sweet. Like a bird that wanders from its nest is a man who wanders from his place. Ointment and perfume delight the heart, and the sweetness of a man's friend gives delight by hearty counsel." Basically, the imagery there is, you can choose good, sweet, or you can choose bitter, bad. And so we need to choose wise friends. A couple more. Proverb 13, verse 20 says, "He that walketh with wise men shall be wise, but a companion of fools shall be destroyed." And then perhaps the one that I think of even before all these others is 1 Corinthians 15, verse 33. It says, "Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits." Some versions say evil companionships corrupt good morals. I think the American Standard says it about that way. So that one, I mean, that's peer pressure in a nutshell. If we have friendships, our deepest friendships, if they are evil, then what's probably going to happen? We're probably going to be evil like those friends. I like the old analogy. Sometimes people will stand up on a table and will try to pull their friend up to the table, and it's really, really difficult. And then they say, "Okay, now friend on the ground, pull the guy on the table down," and just does so easily because of gravity. Well, it's much, much easier to pull somebody down than to help somebody up.
Yeah. Well, you think about all of this idea of peer pressure, the majority of it stems from friends and what your friends think. And of course, in counseling, therapists oftentimes talk about the idea of you are the sum of the people that you're around. So, if you are around good people, then you're going to have good values. But at the same time, if you're around, poor characters, you're going to have, poor characteristics yourself. When John 15 verses 14 and 15, I get that, granted, this is in the realm of the disciples, but I think there's some application for us. Jesus says, "You are my friends if you do the things which I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for the servant knoweth not what his Lord doeth, but I have called you friends, for all things that I heard from my Father I have made known unto you." You want to be a friend of Jesus? Well, then do the things he commanded. So I'd rather be in friendship with the Lord than in friendship with anybody else.
Amen. Well, I guess that about covers it for this episode. Again, season 4, episode 1, talking points, dealing with peer pressure. Appreciate all your thoughts, Matt. And this has been a good topic for needed reminder for me to try to do my best to help teach my children. But Lord willing, September 1st, we're going to have another episode come out, and that episode is going to be gender roles. We could talk about that a long time, can't we, Matt?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, just wait, and that will be one I know we look forward to, and there's a lot to cover. The world's just got that whole topic very, very mixed up, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So,
absolutely.
So be on the lookout for that. And again, we appreciate you, the listener, for tuning in to the Father Time podcast. And we hope that you'll tune back in September 1st for Talking Points, Season 4, Episode 2, Gender Roles.